to our first episode of Chronically Real and Clinically Relevant. We are so glad that you are along for one of our many candid conversations that are going to be happening. People might be wondering how this dynamic duo came to be, where we met, how we became friends, what is our origin story, our meet cute, whatever you may call it. And I believe it all started in the beautiful World Wide Web. Is that right, Stacy?
Yeah, I think I was posting on Facebook trying to find someone to be in a Little Mermaid themed presentation on perinatal psychiatry and a Star Wars presentation on psychodynamic psychopharmacology. Yeah, as one does.
Right. As what
and
time,
and somehow Alie was crazy enough to respond.
because
Yeah.
nothing sounded more enticing to me than either Little Mermaid themed or Star Wars themed psychoeducation. I was like,
But
again, that's
we settled on dragons
right.
ultimately. Ultimately, differential diagnosis of OCD with our favorite dragons.
And I think that's where we are part of a population of a unique crowd of people that this is our idea of a good time and something fun is
Somewhat niche. Somewhat
somewhat
niche.
perhaps. And I think we had this common thread that quickly we're like, we're going to be friends, of wanting to provide accessible psychoeducation and information to people in a way that is creative,
Yeah.
and engaging, and like that people are excited to hear about and feel relatable, like feel as relatable to them as well.
Yeah. So that you can not just learn about a concept, but really figure out what that lived experience of that particular concept is through the eyes of a character. And which brings us to another point that we are really passionate about not just sharing information about psychiatry and psychotherapy, but our perspectives as consumers of mental health treatment. And really making it safer for people to more openly and candidly discuss their experiences. Yeah.
I think that a lot of treatment for me, I mean, I went through at least 15 years of doing non-evidence-based treatment for
Yeah.
what I discovered was severe OCD and feeling really misunderstood and feeling like I was doing I was trying all these different therapies and interventions, and that clearly I must be the problem because I wasn't getting better.
You're
Um,
treatment resistant.
right. When really it was actually I was not receiving
Right.
evidence-based treatment, but also B, I think that's where we're both passionate about that, but also, like you said, providing it through the lens of being really compassionate and flexible and understanding. And I think a lot of that stems from each of us having our own lived experience of navigating the field, and treatment ourselves, feeling misunderstood at times.
And also that's a big part of the neurodivergent experience, both as a clinician and as a patient, the sense of being alien and not fitting in a lot of the times too.
And I think therefore feeling like we must be the problem is one of the common feelings that I would always land with before I got really connected with other neurodivergent clinicians, and also learning more about neurodivergent affirming care, was feeling like if I don't fit in this box, I must be doing something wrong, right? And that pressure to like try to fit and try to be the perfect patient, or a perfect provider that matches these neurotypical standards, was really crushing me, um, and making
And
me feel
preventing you from being totally present and your full brain being devoted to the work of being with your patient.
yeah. What about for you, Stacey? Like, what do you feel like when you were navigating care or through being a provider that's neurodivergent? What have been kind of like the impacts of when you felt like you weren't understood, or that wasn't being, you weren't being provided care or connecting with others in a neurodivergent affirming way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have not really cared for myself very well over the years prior to understanding that I mean, I know I was ADHD very, very young age. That was obvious to everyone. Autism diagnosis didn't come till age 40. And it's I I I feel like myself as a human being, I did not fully embrace how self-care and engagement in my special interest is so important, and how I communicate best. And I was always like, I had a label for myself as weird instead of neurodivergent. I think just having the freedom to be practicing medicine fully authentically and autistically has made me a stronger psychiatrist. So I think of it more as like the maybe the care I have given myself in terms of compassion and embracing my whole self. It's a curious question. Um, Certainly, I think if I had known I was autistic sooner in life, that would have been helpful. It would have helped my therapist out to help me even better too. Um, yeah, I remember my residency program director was like, "Hey, you're almost a little Asperger's, but not really." And my therapist at the time was so offended and was like, "How could you say that about you, Stacy? That's terrible. You're such an empathic person." Right? And she meant well, right? And now we have a much different understanding of autism than we did when I was in residency, thank goodness. But I've been, I think, more fortunate maybe than most, perhaps, in the amount of quality therapy I've been able to get for myself, I think. What do you think, Allie, though?
Yeah, I mean, I think about when you mentioned just now, like that you were self-labeling yourself as weird rather than neurodivergent. I think that's why I was like, when I think of Stacy, I think of a creative genius,
Oh, well, thank
right? And like, I think that's where I'm so drawn to, you know, having conversations with you and other folks who
Yeah,
also identify as neurodivergent themselves. And I think that's where these conversations of like both sides of the coin, right? The assets of being neurodivergent and like celebrating those things and the
yeah,
impact of navigating and moving through systems or relationships in which have been harmful is something I'm so passionate about. And I
yeah,
feel like is not talked enough about, especially through the lens of being a provider. I think that the concept of professionalism is such a damaging, also just, I mean, I think it's such an ableistic
right.
concept and also based on other things too that are harmful. And I think that's a nonstop thing I've ran into navigating the field is like, how do I feel like sometimes I have to choose. Am I going to value and be professional or am I going to be authentic? And that's where I've been trying to find for myself, but also, navigating through with my patients of maybe those things aren't count, maybe they're not against each other, but actually maybe being authentic is being the best professional and provider I could possibly be. And also just the best version of myself that doesn't feel so broken,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, from an Autistic Doctors International, one of my good friends, Laura Caravala, who helped me make a presentation on my YouTube channel on medical training for autistic clinicians. Um, she talks about um, purpose driven professionalism, defined as ask, does it benefit patient care? Does it benefit the clinician doing the care? If the answer to either of those is no, then we should probably chuck it. and it's more about a traditional hierarchical system making people higher up in the hierarchy feel most comfortable.
Yeah.
So I like how she breaks that down. It's not like we're totally tossing the baby out with the bathwater, but
Mhm.
we are basing our choices on what's effective and what works. I mean, have there been instances where you've actually regretted, like, hey, I should have been less authentic in that patient interaction, right? I don't
Hmm.
think so. I mean, I
No,
can't think of
that's
any,
so
right?
interesting that question because I not necessarily, well, sometimes, I'll ruminate, of course, and be like, "Oh my god, you just cannot stop talking, you're overshare." But I think where actually the greatest regret and hurt and that thought that comes up has been through the other providers in the field or through these systems, right? That have continuously come back and said different versions of like, you're too much and you're not enough at the same time, that you don't fit the
Yeah.
mold, that you don't fit. And that's been so extraordinarily painful for me to
No, yeah, I have
navigate
that
through.
trauma from training too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's also where it gave me a keen awareness as a provider too about power differentials. And I think that's where you and I both are very aligned in recognizing with our patients that there is an inadvertent power differential at play of being a provider working with a patient, but also trying to break that down as much as possible because we bring our authentic selves to the work
Right.
we do
And not
and see
just
that as an asset, right?
yeah, and not just the power differential, but I would say the defensiveness
Hmm.
of I must be right and correct to be worthwhile
Hmm.
as a clinician. I was thinking, I was just driving in the car the other day and I was like, man, I became a great psychiatrist, not because of my medical training, but despite it. And I was like, that's really sad. Um, but and again, let me also express some gratitude because I had some amazing mentors and teachers, but it felt like the whole system of training was set up to sort of indoctrinate you into this role of I know what I'm talking about, and you listen to me, and I look and talk a certain way, like a doctor looks and talks, so I am impressive and the person who gets listened to. Which I don't, which is not conducive to a vulnerable, non-defensive, welcoming, and curious connection with another human being, and it makes me sad.
I think that's where a lot of harm is done by providers when they, like you said, harness that power differential as a defensive mechanism that has nothing to do with the patient, everything to do with their own insecurity or their own indoctrination of saying, like, this is what it means to be a good psychiatrist, therapist, blah, 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 is to basically say, like, I am the expert and you're coming to me. And I think that's where you and I also balance, like, we are chronically curious and also we are really passionate about the things that we treat and the work that we do and are, really value providing quality, specialized care without, and are at the same time trying to, doing it through the lens the best we can of not like, this is what I'm telling you as the expert that you should be feeling or that you should be experiencing or should be doing, but more through the lens of trying to understand and seeing the patient as the expert of themselves, which not a lot of providers are willing to do, I think.
Yeah, I'm always like, yeah, maybe I'm an expert on autism, but you're an expert on your experience of life.
Yeah.
People need us to, I mean, they need to feel that we have knowledge and background to bring to the table that they don't have, of course, right? Balanced with a trust in their own experiences, all held with curiosity, neither 100% trusting yourself or 100% trusting the patient because we
Mm.
are flawed and confused human beings.
I think about navigating my own OCD treatment. And exactly that, right? Where OCD was just screaming at me. It was so loud. And I've had two, significant spikes of OCD, one in 2016 and one in 2020. And I think that's where OCD was, I mean, made my world so small, right? Where I had such intense compulsions that I wasn't leaving the house, I wasn't leaving my bed. I was scared to eat anything until it got to the point that I was just eating basically boiled chicken and drinking water. And even then, I was scared to drink water because I'm scared of water poisoning, is what OC then latched onto. It took away everything. And I think that's where, if my provider would have, which no quality OC therapist would be like, yes, you should be scared of all these things. And therefore, your OCD is is true. It's like telling you you need to listen to it, right? That would have not done me any favors. At the same time, when I was at that level of debilitation, like you were saying, I think the reason I got quality care finally was because I had a therapist who was able to balance those things. Of like, Allie, I hear what you're saying. I hear and understand what the things that are that you've been through and how challenging this is right now. I believe you
Yeah,
without believing and feeding into what OCD is trying to tell you to do with that information,
yeah.
right?
You felt you felt trusted and believed. Like, what do you feel like people did, clinicians did that really, really engaged you and like reached you?
Yeah, I think because when I finally received OCD treatment, I was also a therapist myself, that power differential piece was so terrifying to me, right? And if I would have had a therapist come in and basically be like, "So I'm the expert and and not also valued me being the expert of myself, especially me being a clinician, that would have not gone well, right? Where I would have felt so invalidated. I would have felt like I mean, my fear, which is that I'm crazy and no one understands me and no one understands what I'm going through. And I think that's what was so validating is them being able to hear, like, wow, you've been through all these things and this way you feel right now makes sense.
Yeah,
And I hear your story.
the
I'm
way you
willing
feel
to
makes sense.
Right. I want to hear, I want to understand your whole story and your experience. Um, and at the same time, let's tease apart like what is, your lived experience and hold space for that while also pinpointing where is OCD, where is anxiety, what is not working for you, what is what in your life are you like this? I can't do this anymore. And for me at that point, it was like, well, I have no life, and I had to have that willingness to be able to do the work and to be able to listen to someone who was bringing in that expertise. But if they weren't willing to understand me and get me, and think especially being a neurodivergent individual who had navigated years of going through the education system with ADHD, feeling
Yeah.
completely misunderstood and discarded, that was going to be crucial, that trust, in order to do ERP therapy for my OCD. So why are we doing this?
Oh. Yeah. Why are we doing this? Remind me? Okay. Anyways, haha. No, because we love talking about and exploring complex psychiatry, psychotherapy topics. I mean, I'll be honest. Um, I am excited to have an excuse to interview all these authors of these different books I've read and pick their brains about these various levels, these various areas of expertise. And okay, I want there to be more, um, I think, cross pollination of different topic areas in psychiatry and psychotherapy. We would talk a lot about how people can get siloed. Like, I treat OCD. But then when you're treating OCD, you're also seeing people who are autistic, who are ADHD, who have OCPD. Maybe they're borderline, right? And having this nuanced and complex and curious way of approaching the field instead of tunnel vision in one area. And so I want to inspire people to be curious and open and seeing things differently, always questioning our hypotheses about patients. Yeah. What about you, Allie?
Yeah, I think that as a patient with, navigating mental health challenges in general, um, one of the most challenging, debilitating pieces was the isolation and feeling like there is something wrong with me and no one understands and I am alone.
Oh,
And I think that's where, with getting treatment and also connecting with other people with similar
yeah.
values, perspectives, and lived experiences, I discovered very quickly, and I'm continuing discovering how not alone I am, how there are so many people that understand even some of the very niche experiences that I've had. And it makes me feel like, I mean, understood. And I think being understood is so undervalued. Um,
Yeah.
where it is feeling misunderstood has been debilitating for me so many times in my life. And so I really value the like an opportunity to be able to have candid conversations where we're keeping it real, especially for people to hear who are going through experiences themselves in which they feel like
Yeah.
no one would understand, and I'm not even gonna bother to try to explain this because the rejection of not being understood is so
Or
great.
the same.
And so the idea of like being able to share some of these experiences and stories and insights to reach people who are in that boat is so important to me because
But you already do a lot, and I love your videos.
I do yap a lot about my lived experience. And I think also a lot of the work I've done in the field has been working with parents of, adolescents and young adults with OC and anxiety related disorders. And it's the same, I think that same feeling and experience is like that isolation of like, my kid is struggling and I'm seeing all these other kids that seem to be doing just fine, and we are so alone, and no one understands. And that's where, as a therapist that does a lot of the parent work, I really always highlight. I promise you, I'm having 5 more conversations today that are basically a copy and paste
Yeah.
of this, right? And you're not alone. I know you it feels that way. And I am like, I want to connect all these people. And I think this is one of the mediums to be able to do that of like, let's share these experiences and these insights to reach providers and parents and patients and everything in between who otherwise feel like I am alone in this or
You can
misunderstood.
relate for people to feel less alone. I mean, I'm telling you, we're really lucky. I always think I'm so lucky to be a psychiatrist because I can't imagine another profession that where you grow so much personally while you do the work,
Mhm.
or any stronger way to develop self compassion than to be sitting there with other people's vulnerable, shame ridden, guilt ridden all stories day in and day out, and just get like a front row seat to what it is to be a vulnerable human being. You know, you can't not um come away from that without greater compassion for human beings at large, I think.
You would hope. I think that's what.
Or you get crusty and burned out. Okay.
Correct. Or yeah, there are people in the fields that that I'm not sure
Allie
why
isn't
they're in the
naming
field.
names.
Those are the people I spent time with or talked to, but I know that exists and a lot of harm is done that way. And I think that's
Yeah.
also the double-edged sword of being a provider with lived experience who's living the experience and working in the field is that the work is so deeply personal and that can add some layers of challenges and fatigue and also like questioning yourself of like how do I continue to live the experience and be a provider and balance those two things and be authentic, but also be a stabilizing resource and it can be really challenging, but I mean, I wouldn't choose any other field, of course, at the same time, but I think that's a unique piece too of being, navigating our own mental health while being a provider at the same time that a lot of people aren't willing or don't feel safe talking about for very good reason, right? Because of the fear of stigma, and all the harm that can stem from stigma as well.
I know. And it's true. Um, there's still, I mean, yeah, us doctors are kind of the worst at allowing for ourselves to be fallible human beings. Um, at the same time, yeah, and so I know people will say, "Oh, Stacy, you're so brave, just going about like, look at me, I'm autistic, I'm ADHD, I'm OCD." And it's just so much scarier to me to not speak out. And maybe there would be by not speaking out and being openly autistic, ADHD, OCD, etc., is that a missed opportunity for some other doctor out there somewhere to feel slightly less alone and slightly less than.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that scares me more.
Yeah. And I feel the same way. And I think also what scares me more too of not being open and authentic is that I know that when I do that, that when I try to fit in the box and fit the mold and do things through that lens, I also on the inside just start to die. And I've done that. I've lived that. I've been in those systems in which I'm like trying so hard to fit and to stay quiet and small and digestible. And the consequences for me personally have been so huge. And so I think it's both pieces for me that like I won't do that. I won't, stay quiet and small and
Yeah.
digestible for myself and for my own mental health, but similarly for others and for like the people who are in the boat that I was in 10 years ago, new in the field and felt and just was feeling crushed, right? And feeling like I might not be cut out for this. Um, because this is who I am and this field is, and I'm not built for X, Y, and Z. And I think that's where I've been discovering more and more all of these fantastic people and providers that also are like, screw the mold. The mold is an illusion that is built by systems that um, don't have people's best interest in mind. Um, but B, I think I'm realizing that the mold actually is creating outcomes and care that don't align with my values anyway and wasn't the care I needed to, right? And it's scary to a certain degree. Like you said, it's scary to put yourself out there, to put your story out there, to put your thoughts out there. But what is scarier is people suffering in silence, and me also making myself so small that I lose myself in the process.
It's like part of the healing process from that trauma is advocating to change the system.
Absolutely. What are you most excited about to talk about or people to pick their brains or subjects to
Right.
cover during this podcast? What about
Yeah.
for you, Stacey?
I got man. Oh man, so many things. You know? Alie is so cool at talking about religious trauma, and um I would love to talk to Walter Griffith, but we'll see. Just throwing that out there into the universe. And then um, I would love to talk to David Mintz about psychodynamics, psychopharmacology. Um, and I think we're gonna talk to Janet Jaffe about infertility and reproductive trauma. I don't think there's enough understanding and awareness of that issue. And I think differential diagnosis and really complex cases, okay, where your patient is ADHD, borderline, autistic, and OCPD all at once. I'm really into talking about that too. Um, and just I think going deeper into how we make sense of ourselves as human beings. It's kind of vague, huh? What are you about you, Allie?
I think that's vague. You even had some name drop. I would not call that vague. That sounds very. we have a plan. But I think I'm really passionate in the way I live and also the way I provide care. I think is through the trying to weave together people's stories, people's experiences,
Right.
people in their real unfiltered form, and also pairing that with data and research and science. I think it's like piecing together like the piece of like, wow, people are so complex and these stories are so important and kind of also and what what's helpful, what can we do, what can we do differently, what is out there that we have no idea about that could be so helpful for someone, or for a provider with providing more individualized care. And so I think we have some similar interests of like, yeah, what about with treating these disorders, what about comorbidities, because I think comorbidities are the rule, not the exception, and that's also
Yeah.
just the complexity of the human experience. And how can we provide strategic, evidence-based, data-fueled care, while also caring for the stories that people are bringing in. I think getting wisdom from people who work in different niches is something I'm so excited about. Because you can't know it all, nor should you try, because that's an impossible task. And that's where I think there's such benefit of collecting information and stories from people, where you might never be in that exact situation yourself, or treat a patient who's even been in this exact situation or have this exact challenge. But I think there's huge value in that, of just expanding what's out there, and what information is out there, and also what are the stories that aren't being heard,
Yeah,
or aren't being no one is taking the time to understand. I think that's where I'm really passionate, like you said, about like religious trauma, spiritual abuse, and high control religious environments, because it's a very, that's a, I don't feel like there's as much transparency there as there absolutely needs to be, and that these stories deserve to be told, but also with a lot of other topics that we're going to be talking about, with like providing neurodivergent affirming care with and comorbidities, and especially topics that maybe are considered taboo, um, or less comfortable and digestible to talk about, are the things that I am especially interested in talking about, because I think that's where,
I don't think people can learn without being uncomfortable.
and that's a wild statement to say to providers who have OCD, which is a clinically significant discomfort of uncertainty, like discomfort with uncertainty and uncomfortableness. That, and I'm like, right, I do terrible at that with when it comes to my, or when OCD runs the show. It's like, nope, no discomfort. How can I get rid of that? How can I get rid of
Right.
uncertainty? And I think at the same time it's such a value that we both have too, of like, no, we want to know more, we want to
Yeah.
learn more.
Don't worry, Allie. I'm big on discomfort. I'm pretty comfortable with being uncomfortable here.
Love that for you, love that for us.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Chronically Real and Clinically Relevant. You can find us at stacygreetermd.com and
OCD and Anxiety Colorado.com, and we encourage y'all to keep it real
stay curious.